Hey there, Skullheads. I'm Snags.
And I'm Ol Silky.
And make sure you go to the website, follow us on Spotify and YouTube. Check out all the cool links on the website from all the episodes and, buy stuff and all that jibber jabber. Yeah, help us stay flowing in the cash. We've got to make our yacht payments. We're making so much money off this podcast. You wouldn't believe it. Our lives have changed.
The other thing you guys can do is hit play and walk away. You don't even have to listen to us. Just you're going to bed, bring the show up, hit play, and turn the phone over.
Email all your friends. Tell them they'll get nothing but good vibes. We'll send you good vibes.
Why not go to bed thinking, man, I'm helping somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of being the selfish bastards that you are, who you listen to this episode after episode and you do nothing.
Well, my thing that this does bother me is if I know somebody's actively creating something, I'm going to check it out. I'm going to try to support them, provided I don't have to pay anything. And this, we're not asking for just hit play. So,
although if you want to send us money, make a comment on something on YouTube. We'll give you a PayPal address, and you can just just rifle that money into the PayPal account, and we'll call it a day.
All right. So tonight's episode is episode 67.
Summer of Love, 1967. Year my parents met out in Los Angeles.
We're kind of touching on that era. Before, though, I wanted to mention this came across the news desk today. Donald Sutherland has passed away after a long illness. 88 years old. But
is Barry Manilow still alive?
I think so.
Am I getting that right? So Donald Sutherland dies.
Cry.
Life is not fair.
No. June 20th, 2024. Donald Sutherland dies after a long illness. 88 years old. He was, if you remember, Dirty Dozen, Kelly's Heroes. Sergeant Oddball in Kelly's Heroes. He was the creepy professor in Animal House, getting everybody high and hitting on the chicks. And then you cannot forget Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the remake in the 70s.
Oh, the 70s version. Yeah.
Donald Sutherland. Great, just great. But he was in a million things, but I want to mention that. The other bit of news, Queen has sold their entire catalog to Sony Music for over $1 billion.
And rightly so. That's quality shit. They deserve every penny.
Over $1 billion. They haven't put anything out in decades.
Part of that is just inflation,
Yeah.
If it weren't for inflation, it'd probably be $750 million.
Think about how much money Sony has that they're going, we want that catalog.
Oh, they're gonna repackage the shit out of it, dude. They'll probably end up doing the hologram tour.
Sure.
All that shit.
They're certainly gearing up for something, but I mean, I would venture to say most Queen fans have the albums already.
Yeah, but a lot. It's ironic to hear you say that because every time Kiss re-releases an album with a different packaging, you buy it again.
There's a cutoff for Kiss, and that's 77. So
I'm just saying, or Motorhead, or whatever. You got to buy the new pack. They're going to rely on that kind of stuff.
It's possible. I just there's things that make sense. $1 billion when you can just stream $10 a month on Spotify.
They're gonna license the rights. You'll see that shit in commercials. It'll be on movie soundtracks. They're gonna make every bit of that back.
I'm sure they'll be oversaturating the market with Queen stuff. So all you Queen fans, you're gonna be seeing something soon. I just over $1 billion. Like, good crikey.
And
No,
they could just donate 1 million of that to you and me. You know, just
dude, I'd take
a little
500
something,
grand.
a little
I'd take
something.
500 grand.
But no, they're gonna hog all of it.
Yeah. At this point, I'd take $20. Goddamn.
Yeah, just fucking send me $15 from that
Yeah,
deal.
baby needs shoes. Goddamn.
Hey, we just gave that deal a shout out. We should get a little some slice of the pie now.
That's right. So tonight's episode, The Doors, 65 to 73 was their run. Brief smattering of they did back up Jim's
73. You're including the non Jim Morrison Doors.
Yeah, as a band, even though Jim had died, they broke up in 73.
They ended in 70 or whatever year Jim
71.
died. 71.
They were only 54 months with Jim Morrison.
Yeah, that was the real Doors.
They are still considered one of the best-selling bands of all time. 6 studio albums in 5 years. So we're going 67 to 71. And then, we did brief 2 post Jim albums before disbanding in 73. I started to say in 78, they backed Jim's poetry recordings with interpretive music for the American Prayer album. And that album, we'll get to that. I just wanted to mention it here. They did have several live albums. Absolutely Live, Alive She Cried, the 68 Hollywood Bowl, and Isle of Wight are 4 really good interpretations or capsules of what the Doors, what their live performances were like.
What sucks is there was a New Orleans show after LA Woman was released. They went down, did a show in New Orleans, and played a lot of that album live.
Yeah,
and it's not recorded.
But
as far as I can tell,
it's funny you mentioned that. And I can get to this later, but it's pertinent to mention. In 2000, Rhino Handmade was an offshoot of Warner Brothers Elektra Atlantic. Rhino does a lot of reissue stuff, and usually, you get excited, you get the emails. A new email from Rhino. What do they got? And it's usually some bullshit about the Monkees. For some reason, they just love to reissue and repackage bands where you're like, dude, nobody cared yesterday, and now you're sending me.
Oh man, I'm dying for that Bay City Rollers box set.
Yeah,
man.
That's what I'm talking. And so Rhino in 2000 partners up with the Doors, and when Jim got in trouble in Miami, and all that shit went south in 69, they had to cancel an entire, damn near an entire tour. All the venues just were like, we're not doing this. It had got out of control. There was a point where every show Jim might show up. He might be.
He became more of a raging alcoholic as time went on.
Right, but it got so unpredictable that you just didn't know what was going to happen with the crowd, with the police presence, because the cops, the cops would go to these shows and they fucking hated these kids. And they wanted any reason to crack some heads. And so what went on in Miami caused them to lose a bunch of stuff. But the year before, they had toured all through the United States, and a lot of those recordings is what they used to compile Absolutely Live. So in 2000, Rhino Handmade literally puts out about 19 live shows, all from that tour before, and it is just fantastic to hear. But in that reissue series, they did 3 really historic releases. There are 2 interview CDs, a part 1 and a part 2, where it's just Jim talking about what's going on in '68.
All right.
Just him. And one is like really good, and then the other one, there's a lot of background, like they're sitting outside in a cafe situation, and the guy's mic really does pick up a lot of the background, but it's still his story. I mean, you can hear everything Jim's saying. It's just annoying that it'd be like us talking and you can hear cars and shit. It's kind of distracting. So those 2 interview CDs are in that reissue thing. And then there was a box set of raw bootlegs called Beat the Boots or Beat Your Boots. And it's a treasure chest of recordings, but I will say most of them are really below par. It's not something you're going to put in all the time because of how poor the recording levels are.
Right.
And but it is out of print. I got it right when it came out. I had no idea how bad it was going to be, but I did keep it, and you'll see it on eBay for insane amount of money.
I just wish that New Orleans show was recorded. I think LA Woman, and we'll get to it. I think that's their best album.
LA Woman's absolutely.
I would love to hear a show where they're just rocking a lot of it.
The big thing that they did is called No One Here Gets Out Alive. It was a radio show, and it was done in the late 70s, probably after An American Prayer. And the guy actually interviews Ray Manzarek and Robbie Krieger, possibly Densmore as well. He may have interviewed all 3 of them, but it is just an astounding documentary of just the whole Doors journey. No One Here Gets Out Alive, but they were done almost as replicas of what the radio stations got when this got shipped out. These little boxes.
Cool.
And so that was really cool that they did that. But they're up to 19 releases. They do have about 3 or 4 more that are best of versions of some of the live stuff. They kind of took the best cuts from a few of the earlier ones, and there's a volume 1 and 2 of that. But if you have the other stuff, the other 3 are just highlights, so not worth losing sleep trying to track down. But all of that came from that 97 box set that was just called the Doors box set. And in that box set, they included a live show from New York, and people went, holy shit, there's live Doors stuff. And so they didn't realize what they had. So everybody flipped out about the box set, and they thought, Christ, we've got that whole tour. So that's what they did. They slowly put that stuff out.
Cool.
So for the Doors nut that just wants to hear, sadly, I'll say, I have these 19 releases, but a lot of the Doors shows were, hey, we're going to play Light My Fire, then yell at the audience for 20 minutes, then we'll start to play Break On Through, and then Jim's going to. So some of the set lists, you're like, God damn, 5 songs, with a lot of, and there just was not.
It was again. We talked about this in the Stooges episode, but it was basically early punk rock.
Yeah,
Jim was basically setting this template that Iggy followed, which was just
I agree.
Don't try to please the audience. Get up there and fuck with people for 60 minutes and then leave.
And then leave. They were very dangerous in that they did not follow conformity. We're not going to get up and just play a bunch of 12 songs and good night, everybody.
Right. Play our big encore at the end. And
I do in Miami, there's recordings of Jim screaming, "You're all a bunch of fucking slaves.
Yeah.
What are you going to do?" He did not take well to that just blind ideology, the worship shit. Although I think he fed off that
Oh, he
energy of
totally fed off
being
it, but he
idolized.
also, I think he thought less of people because of it too. It's
Yeah,
like, you
I
know,
think as they went along in the circus of it, it just had to be overwhelming. There's stories well into, I believe, during the Waiting for the Sun sessions where John Densmore storms out. Densmore, and we can look this up. Densmore has a book, I believe it's called Riders on the Storm. But in that book, he just comes off like Bill Wyman, um, where you just want to go, dude, I get it. I think if I was in a band and my lead singer was so out of control, just as a friend, you worry about him. And then other times you're just trying to, hey, can we make a record?
yeah.
And I gotta tiptoe around because you're in a,
Well,
that
he
would
he had a nerve. He quit the band in the middle of the Soft Parade sessions. Like
oh, that's what I'm talking
Paul
about. Where he,
Rothschild was um, basically making them record these songs, doing like 50 takes of each song, trying to get it
right,
perfect. You know, they had the horn section. It was this big produced album,
that's a lot.
and Densmore at one point just lost it and quit the band
Left
and
and then came
left.
back the next
Came
day.
back the next morning as if nothing happened. Yeah,
Yeah.
but
So that was Soft Parade. That's what I'm referring to.
yeah,
I know
and
he'd
I
done
have
that.
to say that's got some of the more interesting shit. Especially the song "Soft Parade" is
Oh,
really underrated. It's a
it's one of
great
my favorite songs
song.
by them. I
Yeah,
just love that song. It's like
yeah.
they had an idea for about 4 different songs
Piece it all
and
together,
just
and then in the
tape
middle
it
when
together.
when they're getting real kind of funky with the percussion, and you know, it's
When
just
Jim yells out, "We're going great," and it's just
yeah,
this
yeah,
groove
yeah.
going, man, like,
Oh, killer.
"Successful hills are here to stay." Fuck,
Yeah,
that's just,
a
uh
killer song. It really
yeah.
is. And
So
there's
that's
there's
kind of
some good
a
stuff on there.
yeah, that's kind of just a brief, but then so I wanted to go back. Um, Jim knew Ray from college and then gets out. He's basically hoboing on the beach, living on people's roofs down in Venice. I've been to Venice. It's pretty much the same weather all year round, and it'll rain for a week.
Yeah,
But otherwise,
I was in Venice when I moved out to Los Angeles for a few months to get into the
okay,
film business
it's just blue
after.
sky and 78, 80.
Yeah, Venice was a cool little neighborhood. I think it's gotten when I was there in like '87, it was a cool little bohemian neighborhood, you know, on the beach. But I think it's probably gotten a lot more expensive since then, you know.
Oh, I promise it has, and I bet
Yeah.
it's had its fluctuations of really really bad drugs, and the beach area is just. I mean, you saw it in movies like Fletch, which was pretty much
Yeah.
a true
But that was a
story of
long
how it
time ago.
was.
I'm sure by now, excuse me, it's all gentrified and it's got to be. That was primo real estate, man.
Oh yeah, and
Yeah.
very hippie element. It just is stamped in
Yeah.
that area.
Back in the 60s, I could totally see Jim hanging out there, you know.
Oh yeah, but you could just go up and sleep on somebody's roof and write poetry, and that's kind of what
Yeah.
he's doing.
Right.
So he uh, somehow runs into Ray and tells Ray he's writing songs to a concert that's in his head, which you or I might have been like, oh, okay, buddy, But Ray's like, well, let
I'm
me
going to
hear a
stand
song,
over here. Yeah.
and, so he sings "Moonlight Drive" to Ray, and Ray's like, God damn, I love it, and
Let's swim to the moon.
yeah. So at the time, uh, it was like Rock and Rick and the Riviera, some shit. Where
Yeah, the Ravens or something. I forget
yeah,
something like that.
Ray and his brother had a
Yeah.
band, and so Jim kind of sits in. They've got um, a little house on the beach, and I'm like, you can totally see this in like Bullet or any of those movies, these little all glass and looking out on the ocean and just yeah, man, take a couch. And I mean, you could have easily just burnt through the next 5 years and done nothing
Oh yeah.
and
Just
partied.
wake up every Sunday and break out a brick of hash, and
God, just the honeys coming and going.
Yeah, as long as they shave the armpits, you're good to go.
Yeah, keep it smooth and let's groove. But so they meet in Venice. They kind of come up with a homework assignment where each of them is going to write a song, and the only one that wrote a song was Robbie. He wrote "Light My Fire."
And it was Jim. Jim gave everybody that. Jim was like, "We need more songs. Everybody write a song." And then they found out Robbie was a songwriter. He wrote a lot of good tunes for them over the years. He wrote "Love Her Madly." He wrote a lot of their shit.
I always thought Jim wrote everying, and that's not the case.
Robbie wrote a lot of it.
But "Light My Fire" went to #1. I mean, it was just amazing. So they get their first gig at the London Fog in '66, and there's a story with one of the releases that Rhino Handmade got released is them live at the London Fog, where a girl working for a paper goes down and she's a little tape recorder and she records their show, comes home, throws it in a box, all but forgets about it, goes on with her life. And, 40 some years later, mid 2000s, she's like, holy shit, I've got this Doors recording. I wonder if they'd be interested. And so part of the playlist that we have for tonight's show opens with that London Fog concert. Now, you've got a London Fog story, don't you?
You're convinced it's a London Fog story. So basically in
well, it sounds better. It goes with what we're
it could be. Basically, but it starts actually in the 80s, and like 85, 86, I'm in high school. I read No One Here Gets Out Alive. We'll link that book in the click picks.
Stephen Davis, right?
Essential. Didn't Danny Sugarman write that?
Danny we got to check.
Yeah, but anyways, I read No One Here Gets Out Alive, which was the first big Doors biography to come out, and
it was their Hammer of the Gods. It was really the go-to book.
I became obsessed with the Doors. I had long hair at the time. I bought one of those black and white bead necklaces. I had the exact same necklace Jim Morrison had. I remember being hanging out with some friends of mine. We were at this gym. It was in the summer, and I was in that phase, and I go over to the fire alarm, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna live on the edge like Jim Morrison. And it's just gym, and there's a bunch of people playing basketball and stuff. I forget why we were there. I think we were buying weed from somebody or something.
Right.
But I go over to the fire alarm. I'm like, how far can I move this fire alarm without setting it? I set off the fucking fire alarm. Immediately. That was me trying to walk on the edge like Jim Morrison, my version.
That was written by Jerry Hopkins and Danny Sugarman.
Danny, yeah. So, anyways, during that time, I had a hippie dad who my parents met during the Summer of Love in LA in 1967. And of course I was talking to my hippie dad about the Doors at the time. And he's like, oh yeah, I saw them. I'm like, you saw them? And he said, yeah. I was like, what was it like? And he goes, well, I can't remember much because we're in some bar in LA and they're just playing in the background. It was before they were big. They were just a bar band. I wasn't really paying attention. I was like, you weren't paying attention.
So frustrating.
You're fucking in a bar with the Doors.
Well, the reason I think it's London Fog is they played there and then they got a gig at the Whiskey A Go-Go, but they were promptly booted out.
No, they were the house band at the Whiskey for a while. They were a house band there for a while. And before they got booted out because Jim was singing about fucking his mother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The end with its Oedipal teenage murder, which if you look at how tumultuous the 60s were.
And just to be clear, if you listen to the end on the official release, that's not how he did it live. He went as "Mother, I want to," and he said the rest
he
of it.
goes all
Yeah.
in 2003 there was a thing called Legacy. It was a greatest hits thing, and on that you finally, after all these years, you got the uncensored version of Break On Through to the Other Side, and also the uncensored version of The End. And the studio version of The End that ends up on a reissue of the first album with no news about it. I just got the reissue in a box set called The Doors of Perception. But in that, it's just on, and I hear she gets high, she gets high, she gets high in Break On Through, and I'm like, what the fuck? Like that, it jumps out at you, and I've put those versions on the playlist. But the studio version of The End, towards the end, he's just like the music's going, you hear him saying fuck, 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 making all these noise, but he's saying fuck just over and over. And you just didn't do that in 67.
Oh no.
Somebody let him record it and then went, yeah, that's not going on.
Yeah. Take the Sex Pistols and bands like that to start breaking that barrier.
Oh, well, just look at the controversy with the MC5 saying motherfucker. But,
Kick out
oh
the
my
Janus,
God.
motherfuckers. Yeah.
The earth split open, it's fucking ridiculous.
Punk rock.
Those are on our playlist, so you can hear what they were supposed to say. And then the live version you're referring to, where it's like, fuck you, mama, all night long. That's in that was at the Hollywood Bowl. So
you can hear that. And there's a movie we'll link from the Click Pit as well by Tom DiCillo, which is When You're Strange. Great documentary about the Doors. Phenomenal. And Tom DiCillo is kind of the wannabe Jim Jarmusch. He's an independent director. Jim Jarmusch does the movie about the Stooges, so Tom DiCillo does a movie about the Doors. But it's a really good fucking flick.
I've seen that. I saw it in the theater. I love the movie poster, so I actually have that framed.
Nice.
It's just such a good, and Johnny Depp really does a good narration through it. I think it's about 14 songs on the soundtrack, but just a good.
Got the live version of The End in there though. When they're talking about they were the house band at the Whiskey, and they eventually got kicked out because the first time they did The End live there, it's the uncensored version. So
the London Fog, it's like 8 songs. The End had not been written yet. So because I thought
that's early Doors. The London Fog stuff is on Spotify.
Oh yeah, I know. I put it in the playlist.
Oh sweet.
Sweet. So that playlist, I really tried to just find all the rare stuff and include the albums, the 6 albums with Jim, and the rare like the B-side to Lover Madly with Ray singing You Need Me, Don't Go No Further. Great bluesy tune. But anyway, so for the first time ever, Elektra signs the Doors. Light My Fires like #1. They did a giant billboard for the Doors on the LA Strip, and they had never done
Sunset
a
Boulevard. Yeah, that was the first big rock billboard tradition, which continued. Stones had the famous when Black and Blue came out, they put a billboard up of some woman that tied to a chair, all beaten up.
That didn't go over well.
Yeah, well, the Stones, their whole motto was all publicity is good publicity. They also inspired a lot of the punk rock. There would be no Johnny Thunders without Keith Richards.
Oh yeah, no. And I think the Stones took some influence from the New York Dolls.
Yeah, and a little later stuff, you can hear the punk influence coming
especially
through.
Some Girls. I'd say I call Some Girls
Later,
a punk album.
later 70s, yeah.
So the other thing I would like to link, if you can find it, is Ed Sullivan show where the Doors sing "Light My Fire." Sullivan meets them as he would meet every band. He asks Jim to not sing "Girl, We Couldn't Get Much Higher."
Because it's a
And
drug reference.
yeah, and the Doors like, oh yeah, okay.
Sure,
And
yeah.
then
Well, we won't say.
Jim goes right out there and sings it anyway.
Yeah.
And now, what's funny in reference to that
That
was,
proved that Ed Sullivan was not the boss of him.
yes.
Yeah.
But what's funny is the Stones, instead of "Let's spend the night together" on the
Let's
Ed
spend
Sullivan
some
show,
time together. Yeah.
"Let's spend some time together," and you
Yeah.
see Mick Jagger rolling his eyes,
Yeah,
like
as he has to
doing
sing
what
it.
he's supposed to
Yeah.
do. And Keith was really pissed about it, but he's like, God forbid we shoot ourselves in the foot this early on,
Right.
and we don't come back from
The
it. And
Stones had plenty of time to piss people off later on, and they
oh, yeah.
did. They pissed a lot of people off.
What I love about that performance is Jim is singing his fucking song, and he's heated and in the moment, and he just sings it. He's not worried about Ed Sullivan or anybody else. He's not doing it to piss anybody. This is the lyric. I'm singing my fucking song. Fuck you.
Yeah.
And it's just
My
a
buddy
word.
Robbie wrote these lyrics, and I like them very much.
But it's just a word. Higher doesn't have. I mean, they were so the old guard.
Oh, they couldn't film Elvis gyrating his hips.
Yeah,
it's just
guard
great.
was just
And what's crazy, I'm reading these books. One book that you hipped me to called The Fixer about Fred Otash, who was a private eye back in old Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
Cover stuff up for movie stars when they would, get in trouble. And then I finished that, and I'm reading another one called The Fixers, plural, about a couple of guys who were basically the fixers over at MGM. And what's crazy is that when the culture was so uptight on the surface, all kinds of shit was going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, they were on.
Joan Crawford made a porn movie.
Yeah.
Cary Grant's gay.
Ava Gardner and Lana Turner
are doing threesomes with people.
Yeah,
It's just
loved doing threesomes, and I'm just like, mother of God, if I
know where's the time machine? Just give me some money to get their attention with, and give me a time machine.
Get together, ladies.
But all kinds of crazy shit was going on back then. It was. And then on the surface, Elvis can't gyrate his hips on Ed Sullivan.
Yeah, it's so hypocritical.
It's insane. Yeah,
it really is. There's a Netflix movie called Hollywood, and what's interesting is that they have a black writer, and then I believe they kind of modeled this after Dorothy Dandridge, where they have a black female in a role, and then in the show, this didn't really happen, but in the show, the character that is your Cary Grant, or no, your Rock Hudson character actually goes to the Oscars with his partner, and that happens in the show. And what's interesting is people are a little, I can't believe he did that, but the earth doesn't split open, time doesn't end. It's just an interesting viewpoint. If everyone would just relax and let people be who they want to be, it would just be less of an uptight place, Granted,
well, it's a lot more that way now. It's a lot more that way now than it was back then. But just if you look at the stuff that's just the Ed Sullivan show, you can't say higher. Elvis can't gyrate his hips. You can't say let's spend the night together. And I guarantee you half that staff on the Ed Sullivan show's banging the secretaries.
Oh, yeah.
You know, there's all kinds of
all of it.
crazy shit going on behind the
yeah,
scenes.
their biggest
At least
fear.
now things are a lot more, you know, a lot
Oh,
more relaxed, I'd say, than they were back then.
but it's still there's so much more needs to happen. But
Yeah.
anyway, back to the Doors. They put that first album out. I did want to mention Robbie Krieger plays bass on Soul Kitchen and Backdoor Man on that first album, and then Larry Knechtel plays bass also on Soul Kitchen, 20th Century Fox, Light My Fire, I Looked at You, and Take It As It Comes. So those are the two bass players for that first album. They would consistently rely on Ray to have kind of the bass on the keyboard, you know.
Live, but on a lot of these albums, if you look at the musician credits, there's bass players. A lot of
and I listed the ones for each album.
Yeah.
I did want to say though, you know, talking about Jim Morrison, I feel like he was the first dangerous rock star, extremely unpredictable, but the contrast was how well read and how well spoken he was. Very collegiate. His party trick, his friends would just grab any book from his bookshelf, flip it open to any page and start reading, and he could tell you what it was from and the name of the book, and which I don't. That's a pretty good talent.
Yep.
But you know, they really led the way for the counterculture. The '60s were not ready for Jim's antics. I feel like he, you know, his father was military, and during Vietnam was on a air.
Aircraft carrier. He was commanding.
Carrier.
Yeah, he's a commander on an aircraft. And Jim, you know, in the official bio that the record company got them to write, you know, what do your parents do? He just wrote that they were dead.
Wow. And he had a brother and a sister. So
yeah, he was estranged from his family. And his dad was kind of freaked out that he was doing what he was doing, you know.
Well, I think when you grow up with that '60s Great Santini type of military dad, that, you know, probably very set in his ways and strict, and this is how it's going to be. And Jim's like, yeah, no, that's not how it's going to be.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, the '60s were not ready for Jim's antics. I think, you know, when he down in Miami, we talked about before, he pretends to flash his dick, and that would lead to an entire tour canceling, costing them thousands of dollars. That was the culture. And then there's footage, I believe it's in that When You're Strange movie, of kids of the day being upset at, you know, we just wanted to go see a concert, and
right.
And it was chaos. Well, they're part of the problem. You know, these kids, they just want, all they want to, it's like when Hendrix would play and they just want to hear Foxy Lady. There's other, you know, I'm a musician. Let me play my music. The flip side, though, is the other three doors are out there ready to play, and Jim's, yeah, we're not doing songs tonight. I'm gonna, you know,
I'm gonna rant. Well, you know,
there's stories of him just laying.
All of that said, if he wasn't fucking whacked out on booze, it wouldn't ever be a problem. So, you know, that was the main issue.
Yeah,
I think.
You wonder what kind of demons he had, if there was some abuse that has just never been divulged. You know, there's a story of riding in the car with his grandparents and his parents, and they come up on a car accident
scattered on Don's desert highway. Yeah. Ghost crowd, a young child's fragile eggshell mind. Yeah, that apparently really affected him. They come up on this massacre of a car accident.
He talks about the ghosts entering his head and just for the rest of his life. But, you know, I don't know about that. But so that first album, Cells, does really well. Second album, Strange Days, a really good album. I think the Doors were really proud of Strange Days. I don't think Strange Days did as well as the first album initially, but all 6 of their albums would go gold, which I believe at the time nobody else had, I mean, yes, you had the Stones and the Beatles, but the Doors, I think you got to come down from their untouchable shelf and come down to like an approachable band. The Doors were that good. But Doug Luban plays bass on all the songs except for Unhappy Girl, Horse Latitudes, and When the Music's Over. I think that's mostly key. Well, Horse Latitudes is spoken word.
Speaking of, we're going to call this episode Mute Nostril Agony.
I love that.
Yeah, we got to.
Very explicative.
Yeah, and shit.
But the backdrop of the Doors' reign, and we've been saying this, was just the tumultuous 60s. Bobby Kennedy, McNamara, Nixon, the Vietnam race riots across the country. All of that, you could literally play any of the Doors music over that news footage of all the shit that was going on, and it just fits, sadly.
Yeah.
I think I would say the Beatles and the Stones captured a generation after Elvis went to Hollywood for 12 years and 31 movies. But the Doors were like your younger brother's band. The Doors were chaos, and they really could do anything. You just did not know what to expect. And that's what rock and roll needs to continue to be, a little edgy, a little dangerous,
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Once it becomes formulaic, like most of the 90s music.
What are you talking about? I think Nirvana was completely unpredictable.
They were, but, after that one album and him dying or committing suicide, but a lot of your 90s bands just sound so...
Courtney put out a hit on him. That's what happened.
Box cutter.
Oh, sure. Yeah. But
all
but Nirvana was a return to that. Yeah. After Nirvana ended, but Nirvana, the early 90s was a return to that danger for sure. And a lot of those grunge bands didn't give a fuck. You look at the Melvins and even Lane Staley and his self-destructive streak, and the whole thing was a return to that unpredictable danger.
But then you look at all the
shit that came after Creed and all that. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that was the second half of the 90s.
So awful, just so awful.
The early 90s though was pretty happening at the time. We were both there.
Oh yeah. I remember thinking this is the greatest decade. We're so fortunate. And then you watched Screaming Trees and all these bands that kind of had some hit or miss, but then it just became. Then
it turned into Creed and.
When they made those movies, Reality Bites and all the hey kids, come see your band.
But that happens, you had the 60s and this.
They did that in the 50s.
Uprisings of stuff, and then by the mid 70s, you've got Boston. Boston's a good band, but it's not the Doors. There's no danger there at all.
No, that was a formula of catchy guitar riffs and good. And the first album was great. I still put that.
Yeah, it's a good album, but I think the analogy to Creed and all that stuff still applies. It's danger gets formulated.
So
but anyways, keep talking.
Waiting for the Sun, third album, Doug Luban back to play bass. They also had Kerry Magnus and Leroy Vinegar playing bass for Waiting for the Sun. Now, what's interesting here is Paul Rothchild, they do 5 songs, and then Jim wanted to do Celebration for the Lizard on side 2.
Yeah, he wanted the whole side.
The whole side
to be a Celebration of the Lizard poem.
You did have it around that time. You did have In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida was an entire side, 17 minutes long.
Yeah, but that was a song. It wasn't.
And really, the other poetry. 5 songs on that Iron Butterfly album are not that great. But Waiting for the Sun.
I've heard them.
My Illusion or My Mirage, some shit.
Right.
Real hippy dippy stuff. But
Yeah,
no,
don't
Waiting for
care.
the Sun has some great tunes, and then I believe they took some stuff from the first album sessions, and Paul Rothschild excluded Celebration of the Lizard and rounded that out to a 10, 11 song album instead of
Yeah, so half of Waiting
5
for the
songs.
Sun is outtakes from the first Doors album, which is
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. But I really you blend those first 3 albums, those are all the overplayed hits with the Doors. They're such good albums. I really like Waiting for the Sun. There's a lot of great songs on there. And then the inside cover had the lyrics to Celebration of the Lizard King,
There you
which
go.
would not see any type of recording until Absolutely Live came out in 1970, where they actually perform. It's about a 14-minute performance.
There you go.
They do a lot of it. I think that would have been a continuing work in progress. There is a 17-minute version recorded in the studio that I do have on our playlist for this show. So it's really cool to hear what they initially laid down. And I think they would have continued to tweak that. It may have ended up on an album in the mid-70s. Who knows? You know?
Well, if Jim had lived, it would have become a disco hit in '78.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It could have gotten really bad, but
Boogie with the Lizard King.
yeah. So the touring and the chaos really starts to take its toll by the third album. And we talked about Densmore fighting with Jim about his unpredictable behavior. I think it would get old. You get on stage, you don't even know what the set list is going to be because your prima donna
totally
just decides to lay down on the stage.
I remember
Ray would sing half the show.
I remember reading an interview. It was either Robbie Krieger or John Densmore after the movie The Doors came out, the Oliver Stone movie.
Oh yeah,
which if you can remember,
it's all fantasy.
When we heard that Oliver Stone was making a movie about the Doors, I remember just being so fucking excited. We were both just like, oh my, the dude who made Platoon is making a movie about the Doors.
Yeah.
And at the time it was awesome when it came out, but the more you learned about it, it's really just Oliver Stone's romanticized version of the whole thing.
Yeah.
But whoever the interview was with, it was either Krieger or Densmore, was like, there's a scene where they all go out in the desert and trip together.
Yeah.
He was like, I would never, ever trip around Jim Morrison. He said, Jim was fucking crazy. There's no way I would ever drop acid around him.
Jim would walk along the banister. He would get up on the railing. He didn't give a fuck.
Balance on these railings, 4 stories off the ground. Yeah, that's when no one here gets out alive.
Especially if you were there and you were nervous for him. He really fed off of that.
I'm sure. Living on the edge of danger, just like me and that fire alarm. Same thing.
Yes.
Same thing.
Yeah. See?
I got to say something, though. If you're talking about Waiting for the Sun, we have to talk about the guitar solo in 5 to 1.
Oh.
There's a guitar solo in 5 to 1 that Ace Frehley basically copies note for note in the Kiss song She, and then a generation later, Mike McCready basically copies note for note in the Pearl Jam song Alive. So it's interesting to just, the guitar solo I'm talking about, right?
I do. Yeah.
Well, and crazy. That was it exactly. You don't even have to listen to the record now that I did.
No, I heard it. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you listen to those 3 songs back to back, it's pretty interesting to see that same guitar solo basically lifted by 2 other guitar players after Robbie.
That's really the last time we need to mention Pearl Jam ever.
Oh, I know. Yeah,
But
but still, unfortunately, they're part of that story.
yeah, no, that's funny.
Ace,
And
of
then
course, Ace Frehley, of course, recorded the best
Ace,
version, even though he didn't
absolutely.
write it. Yeah.
So then they did Soft Parade, and there's footage of them. It's called Touch Me is the song, and Robbie Krieger has these big sunglasses on because he has this massive black eye, and
Okay.
I believe he got elbowed in the face um, shortly before, and so he's got to do this video with this big fucking black eye.
And
Uh,
his girlfriend beat him up. Probably what happened.
Yeah, there is a story. I didn't have time to figure out, but that's just something to look for.
Yeah.
Um, but Soft Parade, I figure at the time you had Blood, Sweat, and Tears was really taking off, and Chicago, and so you had some of these bands with a horn section behind them, and this is their version of that, which you could say they were really doing lounge music at this point. I like Soft Parade. It's a very different record. Um, it's kind of stripped down, but with a horn section now. It contrasts greatly from Waiting for the Sun.
Yeah. And
I
not all
really like
songs
Soft
have a horn section, but enough of them do
a
that. That's
lot.
kind of
Yeah,
how you
it's
remember the
heavy on
album.
that.
Yeah.
The 50th anniversary of Soft Parade has a bunch of those horn section songs without the horn section as
Oh shit.
demo trend, and I put that in the playlist so you can check that out.
Sweet. You can hear the
Um,
hornless version.
yes, and
Nice.
it's really more the Doors than
Yeah.
with all that blown out. But
Yeah, but
Harvey,
I think "Touch Me" wouldn't be the same song without the
oh
horn
yeah,
section.
no,
Yeah, he
they
was the thing that was
those are
going
the
on
version.
that we haven't touched on is that basically for the early part of his career and while he was growing up, Jim Morrison's biggest influence vocally was Elvis.
Yeah,
And by the time you get to Soft Parade, he's really digging on the chairman of the board a lot more. He's listening to a lot of Sinatra albums and stuff. So I guarantee you the horn section stuff is probably Jim's suggestion to the producer, Paul Rothschild. Hey man, let's get some I've been listening to a lot of Sinatra lately. Let's get some horns in here. And
so that's what he wanted to do. I didn't know that.
well, he was listening to a lot of Sinatra around the time. That's fact.
Uh,
That's in the When You're Strange movie. They talk about that.
yeah,
So he's switching from Elvis influence to Sinatra. So it's a natural that you got to drop some horns in there.
yeah. Again, Blood, Sweat, and Tears was on fire though with that same exact sound.
There you go.
So, but anyway, Harvey Brooks plays bass on Soft Parade. Plus, they got Doug Luban back. I think he really hung around, played on several of their albums. So, Strange Days, Waiting for Sun, and Soft Parade all have Doug Luban.
Nice.
But by Soft Parade time, Jim's growing really weary of this rock and roll circus. And he discusses leaving the band to go write poetry and really get away from everything. But of course, the Doors are like, dude, we what the hell are you talking about?
Well, his girlfriend wanted him to leave.
Yeah, Pamela Corson was definitely the Yoko.
She was Yoko in that shit for sure. She's let's go just go.
What's funny?
All
They
you
always
do is
this.
pay attention to me.
He's
come pay
making
attention
all
to me
this
all the
money.
time.
She says, "You can stay home and write poetry, and I'll run this boutique.
Yeah, I'll run a clothing shop. Yeah,
A clothing shop.
Sure.
Oh, with your money,
Yeah,
your money will fund. Get out of here.
Yeah, it's like Yoko taking all of John's money and investing it in real estate in the 70s. That's that's why she's worth whatever $100 million. Yeah.
So then they do that show down in Miami, and all hell breaks loose. Jim's screaming at the audience, "You're all a bunch of fucking slaves," and he's really lashing out at just that blind ideology. Whatever he says, they're going to do, and he's trying to wake them up. And you're just not going to reach them. They're there to. It's a different platform. They're there to see a show. They
Also,
want to
if you're
hear
drunk and
music.
they're not, you're not going to wake them up to where you're at.
Yeah.
Pass some beers around, then
Yeah.
y'all commune.
And I think the Doors repeatedly tried to get some music going. They did play like 4 snippets of songs while he's just ranting and screaming at the crowd. And then the fans rush the stage. Part of the stage collapses. The police haul Jim off. And in the middle of that, he's like, "Y'all want to see my cock?" And then he, sticks his finger through his pant, the old finger through the zipper thing. But there's all these photos taken from all kinds of people, and there's not any photo in existence that actually has him with
that was enough, though. The cops basically, I'm sure they wanted to fucking, throw this guy in jail before they showed up for the gig that night, and that was enough for them to say, he did it.
They wanted to shut these damn hippies down. They hated them beyond the Vietnam War going on. It was just such a fucking slaughter, sending all these kids off to die, and these old thick-neck cops.
Little known fact: the oil companies, some major oil companies in the U.S. had just signed contracts with the government of South Vietnam. There's a bunch of offshore oil around Vietnam, and to basically mine these oil reserves, and then the North Vietnamese invade. And so it was about money as much as,
absolutely.
or then, more than about, we got to kill the commies.
Well, and they're shipping all these drugs back in body bags.
Well, and then the CIA is fucking smuggling drugs back. Yeah,
we should have never dabbled in their civil war because But
if we die before the next episode, now you guys know why, because we were laying down the truth.
So Jim gets punched in the face a couple times by the police. They really worked him over. It was really fucked up. But so April 4th of 1969, Jim surrenders to the authorities. And like I said before, it's really about the old guard refusing to let in, with the new. The times they were a-changing, as somebody said once. But Jim was facing possibly 3 years in jail. And, it was hanging over him. It was pretty heavy. But the lawyers come in and they move these dates. So they're like, hey, let's tour while this is going on with appeals and stuff. But in 1970, they do release Absolutely Live and a best of called 13, which is a really good collection of songs. It was called 13 because of the number of songs that are on the best of.
I've never heard of that. This is before Morrison Hotel?
Before 1970, before Morrison Hotel. Or
they had a greatest hits album before Morrison.
13.
Never fucking heard of it. Interesting. Learns. See, if you listen to the Snags and Silky show, kids, you'll learn something.
Yeah,
guaranteed.
You're gonna learn some shit.
Even I'm learning shit live on the air. It's amazing.
So 13 is a good collection, and everybody said 13 is the 13th letter of the alphabet is M for marijuana. 13 was always a reference that the bikers used for marijuana.
Well, also Morrison. Morrison starts with M.
Yeah.
That's some cosmic shit.
But the what I found, 13 is only 13 because it's the number of songs that are on the collection. It's that, there's not a lot more thought put into that, but it's the only best of to come out during his time with them.
Never fucking heard of it.
Yeah, you've probably seen the album cover. If you look it up, it's pretty. You've probably seen it, but
Doubt it.
Anyway, Morrison Hotel comes out in 1970 as well. Ray Neapolitan on bass, and Lonnie Mack, the famous blues guitarist, plays bass on Roadhouse Blues and Maggie McGill.
Wow.
And for me, Morrison Hotel and LA Woman are the Doors finally giving in to that blues influence.
It's a lot like the end of the Beatles' career, where they do all the other shit, and then they're just like, let's just rock.
Let's
just
strip it
rock
down
on a couple albums.
some purity.
Yeah.
I feel like Morrison Hotel was like a reset. Hey, man, we got really crazy. We're playing lounge music there for a minute.
Yeah.
Let's bring it back.
What are we doing?
Core
Roadhouse Blues and Peace Frog are two of the most just jamming Doors songs ever to be laid down. I mean, two of my favorite Doors songs.
Robbie Krieger talks about a band in the late 60s. They're kind of obscure, but they were called the Blues Project.
Okay.
For years, you would try to search that and you wouldn't get, because Blues Project sounds like something,
it's pretty generic. Yeah.
It's a generic, it's not specific.
Right.
Now, if you go on iTunes or something, Blues Project actually has some albums on there.
El Condor in the house. Got to represent, yo.
El Condor, talk to the people.
Pimp that website to the masses, kid.
Go ahead.
Merch shop.
All right, that's fine.
I'm a slap dad.
Okay. Thank you.
You get me slapped today. Okay.
Wow.
Give that kid some Ritalin.
Yeah, Jesus. Go away.
All right. See, he's doing a Jim Morrison and disrupting the
chaos.
Total.
Jesus Christ.
Anyways, like you said, merch. Go to the website and buy the merch. Oh, he's coming back. He's coming back.
On, enough.
5.
So, anyway, they get back to their blues roots and they shine. Their last two albums with Jim are just untouchable.
Especially LA Woman is that.
And I love LA Woman. There was 70, they seem to really embrace the blues, like I said, and mature into their final phase.
Part of what happened with LA Woman, though, is, what's this guy's name? Bruce Botwick, I think.
Bruce Botnick was he was like their Don Landy.
Yeah, he was the engineer to Ted. Yeah, he was the Don Landy to Ted Templeman, if you do the Van Halen analogy. But he was the engineer, and they're starting the recording sessions for LA Woman, and Paul Rothschild he just can't figure it out. He's not feeling it. And finally he just says, you guys are gonna have to figure this out yourself. And he quits. And
and Jim was showing up hammered and
I'm
shit,
sure.
Man.
Yeah.
I do remember Paul's parting thing is the only way you're going to survive is if you make this record yourself, and storms out, and then Botnick steps in to produce.
Yeah, and Botnick said, you know what? Just play.
Yeah.
Stop thinking about it and just come in and play every day. And they laid down the best Doors album.
And they got Jerry Sheff on bass, Elvis's guy.
They got Elvis's bass player, and you can feel the difference, man. Elvis in that era, he was done with the fucking movies. He was coming back to the gospel and the R&B. That early 70s Elvis stuff, he was back, and you're not going to do that unless you got a funky ass bass player.
Elvis in Memphis is untouchable.
Yeah.
He did some recordings at Stax.
Yeah.
Fuck, man. And then Jerry Sheff, all those guys from the Wrecking Crew play with him.
Yeah. He lends his bass. So Jerry Sheff was in the Wrecking Crew, that studio group? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, those guys. Man, you can hear the difference in the bass on LA Woman. There's an extra layer of
the changeling, which is like get loose and then just
man. There's just that whole album. There's an extra layer of funk on that album coming from Jerry Sheff, It's a
Yeah.
great album. I just love that album so much.
And this is
solid
what's
rock.
crazy about that album. They've been playing together for 5 years. They rose to the challenge and they wrapped that whole album up in 7 days. LA Woman.
Yeah,
And you
because
think
they just
about
played. Bruce was like,
right.
just play.
You think about these goddamn albums. These bands take 14 years to put together,
Yeah.
and they lost sight 13 years ago. They don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah. Look at Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to. But
Yeah.
any of these bands, like, where's what are you doing? You know,
Yeah.
I get tour for 2 years, come back and make a fucking album. You know,
Yeah.
People move on is all I'm saying. You lose your fan base
Unless you're Tool. Those fans stick around.
Yeah, they
till the
stick
cows
around,
come
but
home.
a lot of people move on and get into other
Yeah.
things, and you just so like Eric Clapton puts an album out next week. I'm not getting it. I'm not even going to listen to it.
Well, he started sucking after Derek and the Dominoes.
1971, that was it. Yeah.
Dwayne died and took Eric's soul with him, apparently.
So LA Woman comes out, like you said before, they do a couple shows. There's this New Orleans thing where they actually play some songs from LA Woman. And then Jim does finally go to Paris in 71 with Pam to write poetry and really attempt to, I think he would have told you at the time, oh, I'm going to really mellow out. And, I think he'd done the damage. He'd gained a lot of weight.
He was coughing this chronic cough. He went to the doctor when he was in Paris, and the doctor's like, "You've got to stop drinking."
Yeah, this is the same thing that happened to Zakk Wylde. He was coughing up blood.
Oh, nice.
The alcohol was in his lungs or some shit.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. And Zakk Wylde did stop drinking. Now he drinks coffee. He's like he sells coffee. He has his name all over coffee.
Oh, there you go.
But
coffee's not bad.
He had gained a lot of weight, and that same thing. And so I think that happened. And then Jim is real weird. You hear this story where he goes to take a bath. He's not feeling well. And he literally calls out, "Are you still there?" And then he's just gone. And it's it could all be made up, it could literally be Pamela just making some shit up. But,
the CIA killed Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin and
because
Jim
he was
Morrison.
the last one.
Yeah.
By that point,
27 Club.
Janis had died, Jimmy had died, and then Jim's walking around going, "Yeah, you're looking at number 3."
Yeah, he was saying that if anybody killed Jimmy, it was the mob that owned his contract.
Yeah,
I think they all just
OD'd
on drugs
way too hard.
Yeah,
nobody thought drugs were as bad as they are viewed now. Like, people know what they're doing.
Oh yeah, that was the era of the martini lunch. You worked at a business. You go out to lunch and everybody's chugging martinis
Pack
for lunch.
them away, and you go home and beat your wife. And
you come back and you got a bar. You got scotch in your office.
Yeah. The suburbs, all the key party. It just unbelievable.
Crazy.
Jim
Wacky
Rockford
times.
trying to solve crimes and getting chased around and
wackadoodle.
Yeah. So the Doors were a massive influence for me in high school. Lyrics were like an initiation into a private club. Songs like Land Ho, The Changeling, or Texas Radio and the Big Beat, Horse Latitudes. That shit just blasted all conformities. You felt cool knowing these lyrics. They weren't just lyrics to me. But a huge follower of the Doors back in the day. I know when Snags and I had our apartment on Courtney, where we wrote that book that's in our
On the Click Pit. It's about the year of chaos when me and him and our friend Mike from high school were roommates, and we lived in our own Animal House. It's wacky and just
My room was wall to wall
packed-
doors posters.
packed with thrills. Yeah, we had an Elvis wall, a
Yep.
bunch of Elvis posters. We had a shoe
shoe
wall where
wall,
we
yep.
nailed old shoes to the wall.
I do
It was just
recall
fun
us
time.
nailing empty boxes of trash to the wall too.
Anyways,
but
the Doors.
Anyway,
You got to understand, growing up in the '80s, when "Flock of Seagulls" is what you're expected to listen to.
yeah,
The Doors was a breath of fresh air,
it really was.
even though it was 20 years old, 15, 20 years old at the time.
So to wrap up for me, I would say look for Light My Fire, Ed Sullivan Show. Check out When You Were Strange. There's a ton of Doors books. Ray Manzarek. I don't know. I don't think John Densmore's written a couple. Obviously, No One Here It's Alive, that Danny Sugarman. And if you can find that historic radio show, No One Here Gets Out Alive, that is amazing. Right from the horse's mouth in the 70s. You can't get any closer to Jim than that. And then, you can check out Other Voices and Full Circle. It's just the three remaining guys. And then
Not the Doors.
Yeah, 78, An American Prayer. Shortly before Jim's death on his birthday, he went in to the studio and, as a birthday present for himself, actually recorded in a professional setting him reading his poetry. And he was very passionate about that. Well, the Doors in 78, they get Bob Glaub to play bass on Ghost Song, and Jerry Sheff comes back in to play bass on Adagio, which is a really good song used in the movie. But American Prayer is like 5 parts, one being the childhood, then the high school years, then the young poet stoned on rooftops with acid dreams, then the musical career, and then the final summation in a way of the man's entire life and his philosophy. And that's An American Prayer.
There you go.
Really good album. It has its moments. Robbie Krieger.
I've tried to get through it. I mean, I think I've listened to it once, but it's poetry and the Doors making weird noises behind it. It's not Jam and Doors songs.
But see, and I would say you can't listen to it and expect a Doors album. You should listen to it to hear Jim doing his poetry. And
yeah.
So it's like if you listen to Thin Lizzy and you're expecting Motorhead, you're not going to get it. It's that
sure
kind of for me.
Sure.
But it's not a Doors album, but it's like Jim's first solo album or his only solo album, with the Doors playing in the background. Yes, that's for me. That's the Doors. A lot to look at. There's tons of footage of them, which is just so good to see. Really good time to catch Jim doing his thing. So
yeah. So there you go, kids. That's the Doors. Peace out.
Deuces.
Deuces.